Okay, thank you for being here and welcome everybody. So I'm going to introduce myself for those who don't know me. My name is Giovanna Franklin. I am a qualified homeopath. I have been practicing for over 10 years now. So tonight we're going to talk about chronic fatigue and my take on chronic fatigue. And I'm going to use some slides just to keep myself on track. I don't particularly like slides, but they're pretty good to keep me on track so that I don't waffle about. So just wanted to say that I am homeopath, but I am not a medical doctor. This is not a do-it-yourself kind of webinar. This is for educational purposes only. So I am not here to say, now go and do this and this and this, okay? And I will explain why. I'm going to tell you what we're going to cover. And this is where I'm going to share the slides with you. Okay. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover. What is chronic fatigue, of course? What are autoimmune conditions? Why do the usual modalities often fail? The 3 steps in practice, and this is what I do, what I started doing in the last few years. Some case studies, and of course, if you have any questions at the end, you're welcome. So, first of all, why did I choose chronic fatigue as a topic for this webinar? It's because in the last few years, and particularly, I really have to emphasize the difference. You know, there is a before COVID and after COVID, at least in my experience, in my practice. So, what was working before COVID in terms of treatments, in terms of remedies that I was prescribing, I realized was not working after COVID. And also, I was getting so many more cases of chronic fatigue, whether from long COVID, and we can talk about the terminology as well, how we call these conditions, whether it was long COVID or it dated from prior on COVID, but I was receiving an awful lot of cases of people who were practically incapacitated. They could not work, they could not do anything, they could not function because of chronic fatigue. And of course, when something like that happens to your practice, you start to notice. And I realized that I needed to change the way that I was doing things, trying to help my patients, because, as I say, what I was doing before that was working was not working anymore. So, and this is what I will talk about when we touch on why do the usual modalities often fail now, including what I used to do before. And then we're going to talk about what I'm doing now that I find is working. Okay. So, symptoms of chronic fatigue, and we'll also talk about the terminology as well, because chronic fatigue is also called ME. I think in the UK they call it ME more, or long COVID. There are different terminologies, different diagnoses, and it really depends on who the doctor is and who is giving you the diagnosis. But basically, what we're talking about are symptoms like exhaustion, not feeling better for rest, and feeling way worse for exertion, brain fog, sleep disturbances, insomnia predominantly, and flu-like pain in the body. Now, these are the main symptoms. They're not the only symptoms, and sometimes they overlap with other conditions. We can have allergies, we can have high histamine issues, we can have digestive issues as well. And again, this kind of complicates things when we're talking about terminology, diagnosis. And so some people call it fibromyalgia. And then some people put all of these names under the umbrella of autoimmune conditions, which is another term that can be a little bit confusing, because what is an autoimmune condition? And there is a debate about that as well. So autoimmune conditions, the official definition is that where the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's unhealthy cells, tissues, and organs, causing inflammation and damage. And so, for example, some people say that chronic fatigue is not an autoimmune condition because it doesn't leave permanent damage in the tissues. Now, that is debatable because, in my opinion, I'm not a medical doctor here again, but any chronic condition that you may have, if it goes on for long enough, it will cause some kind of permanent damage anyway, whatever it is. So, so this is just to give you an overview and to explain that these labels are just that. They are labels, okay? But we're talking about, luckily, homeopathy treats the individual, not the symptoms or not the condition. And so, yeah. Okay. There's still some people coming in, so excuse me a second. Okay. Right. Okay, so let's talk about what was working, what used to work before COVID, at least in my practice. So in cases of chronic conditions, typically I use a bioscan. I use Zyto Bioscan. I like to understand if there's any underlying issues that perhaps are not immediately obvious. And so typically I would find candida or heavy metals or parasites. And so the idea was to gently detox the body, to lighten the burden, the toxic burden, and allow the body to start working again and heal itself, help with the self-healing. As you probably know, if you have experience of homeopathy, homeopathic detox is one of the most gentle ways and gentle modalities to detox. But I started to find that doing that, A, was not working, 2, was aggravating the patient. It was aggravating the symptoms a lot, and it was not possible to continue. I had to stop. Fasting is something that I don't typically prescribe. I do not suggest, I do not encourage, but I do see intermittent fasting. I do see fasting, water fasting, 72-hour fasting, 48-hour fasting everywhere, especially on social media, being encouraged, being promoted, and being advertised as a kind of panacea. And there are lots of protocols online that people just go and do by themselves at home. What I would say is that they don't work for everybody. They might be amazing for some people. I would say that they do work best, in my experience, from what I see. They work best for those who are already healthy. Their health is already pretty strong. They have been, they have a lifestyle that supports this. They do exercise, they have a healthy diet. And so fasting is a way to, yes, reset your metabolism. And every now and then, it can really boost your immune system, reset your metabolism, and all this good stuff. However, if your health is very weak, if your immune system is being weakened, if you are coming from a chronic situation, a chronic condition, and you see one of these protocols online on Instagram or whatever, and you do that by yourself, that can go a bit wrong for you. And this is why I really do not recommend, if you are suffering from any chronic condition, to do a fasting. Okay. There are places, there are spas, I mean, if you're doing that under medical control, if you have support all around you, by all means, but fasting is not something that is recommended from my point of view, particularly if you have a big load of toxins in your body. And this is because if you're highly toxic, if your system is highly toxic, you start fasting, your organs, whose job it is to start going and get those toxins, they find nothing because you're not eating, there is no food there. And so they start going to where the toxins are stored in your body. So they start dislodging the toxins from other places, and these toxins go into your bloodstream, they go into circulation, you start feeling really, really ill. And so, yeah, it's not a good idea. Supplements and herbs, again, I have a lot of patients who now come with chronic fatigue and allergies and all sorts of other things. And they say, well, I have tried all these supplements, all these herbs, and they give me the list. And I say, yep, that on paper, that sounds right. This is what I would have thought myself in the past. That sounds like a good idea. Take ginseng, take this, take that. But they don't work. They don't do anything at all. Or again, they aggravate. And one of the most common things that I find these days is the hypersensitivity in patients. It's not just that the remedies or herbal supplements don't work anymore. They really, really aggravate. And so I have patients who come to me after working with functional doctors or perhaps other homeopaths or other modalities, and then they come to me and they say, you have to help me, but just be aware that I am super sensitive, so be very careful. I'm really scared because everything I take aggravates me. And this is something that most people I see these days tell me. So it's a very, very common thing. And addressing the symptoms homeopathically, even just, trying to deal with the biggest symptom, perhaps when you take a case and there is a hierarchy of symptoms and you try to work with whatever bothers the patient the most, like insomnia or digestion issues, it just doesn't work. It's literally when people come to me and say nothing works, I tried everything and nothing works, they're not kidding. They did try everything, and what they tell me they tried, to me, makes sense. I cannot fault whoever prescribed remedies in the past, because again, it's what I had been trained to do. So why is it not working? Okay, now why is it not working? So this is where I came across homotoxicology. So homotoxicology is the explanation. It gives you an explanation, and it shows you the evolution of disease. It's not a new thing. I don't know if any of you have heard of Dr. Reykjavik. He was a German medical doctor in the 1930s. So like I said, it's nearly a century old. And he started to work and develop a different way of practicing homeopathy. And and after his work, the research has been going on. There is still research being done. So there has been an evolution of Dr. Reykjavik's theories. And the basis of this school of thought is that toxins are at the core and at the root of every disease. Okay. And toxins can be obviously the external toxins that we all know, the heavy metals, the pollution, the bad food, and all the rest of it, but also endotoxins, the toxins that our own body produces. And the best example is high histamines. Histamines are there for a reason, but when our body starts producing and overproducing, these histamines, that is a problem. So those are toxins as well. So this in the that I'm showing in this slide is a kind of abbreviated version, is a reduced version of what is called the 6-phase table. And it shows you the evolution of disease. And the reason why there are only 4 phases instead of 6 is that the last 2 are not relevant for this webinar. So I'm just showing you the first 4. So the first one is called the excretion phase, which is very simple. So you have a fever, you start sweating, okay? So the body starts eliminating toxins naturally, or you eat something that doesn't agree with you, that's bad, you have diarrhea. So the body expels naturally and immediately whatever it is that is not good for it. Then there is the inflammation phase, is the next phase. And this is when you have acute infections, again, viral, fever, or I don't know, skin infection or ear infection. Again, these are acute situations. There are acute conditions. There is a beginning, there is development, and then there is an end. Eventually it stops, and usually they are short-lived. Then there is the deposition phase. So what happens is that we're always dealing with toxins. Our immune system, our internal organs are constantly dealing with toxins, and our organs, when we are in health, they know what to do. They know what their job is, and they deal with the toxins, okay? When they start to be overwhelmed, when our liver or kidneys start to be overwhelmed, either because of overexposure to toxins or because, for whatever other reason, the internal organs start to feel weak, they cannot deal with the toxins in the same way, they're not as efficient, then what happens is that the toxins get stored in particular pockets in our body. And this is a defense mechanism. So the body says, okay, I've got this poison, all these toxins, I don't know what to do with them. They're kind of in excess. And so let's put them away where they cannot do any harm to the rest of the body, or they can do the least harm. And so they go into the fatty tissues, or they go into the joints, or they go into other areas, but they are confined. Okay, so they're still like they put them in a cupboard somewhere. And then the next phase, if nothing is done about these toxins and the toxicity progresses, then we have what we call the impregnation phase. And this is where we have the chronic or autoimmune conditions, or whatever you want to call it. But this is where all or most of the patients I see, this is where they're at. They're in the impregnation phase. What does it mean? It means that the toxins now, the level is so high that even the cupboards are full, and the toxins start going into what is called the matrix. And the matrix is all the spaces in between the cells. So they go everywhere. Okay, so this is where they start going everywhere, and this is where the symptoms become chronic, and they become unmanageable. And unfortunately, this is where the patient says, okay, now I really need to do something about this because I cannot function. Okay. If perhaps they had done something about it at the early stages, it would be easier and it would be quicker to resolve. But typically, people keep going, and until they cannot keep going anymore. So that's the impregnation phase, and this is where we start. So the idea from the homotoxicology point of view is to reverse the process. And so go from the impregnation phase and go back to the deposition phase, and then to the inflammation phase, and then the excretion phase. So it's kind of the Hering's law. Okay, so you go in reverse when you're healing. Okay, but how do we do this? Okay, so yeah, so this is the description. The impregnation phase, we have the multiple chronic symptoms.
मैं कहते इधर से आता, मैं गाड़ी आगे ले लेता.
And okay.
अब आप बोल रहे हो क्या मीटिंग में?
नहीं.
If somebody
25
could mute yourself.
25 says 375. 25 says question. वो आ रहा है क्या? आ रहा है क्या?
नहीं.
Okay.
25 says 25 says 5 says 35. 25 says 63, 25 says 7 says 5. 25 says 8 says 200. 25 says 5 says 25.
Okay, that's great. Right, I'll start sharing again. Okay, so where were we? Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. So yeah, so this is where the chronic condition, the chronic symptoms are. And as I mentioned earlier, the CFS often comes with other symptoms, which are also chronic. There are also mental emotional issues like depression. And a lot of the times, at least in my experience, in my practice, there is a lot of emotional trauma. And as we will see, emotional trauma is also, I would argue, a kind of toxin. It works in the same way. And I will explain later on. Okay, so I was talking about this 3-step program, right? It is simple, but it's not simplistic, and it's not necessarily easy either, okay? But I will explain, I will go through what it is. So lymphatic drainage, there are these 3 phases: lymphatic drainage, liver and kidney support, and symptomatic treatment. Now, these 3 stages are not necessarily done in succession, like one after the other. They can be done at the same time together. But I like to define them in this way because I think it's clearer to understand what it actually is. So lymphatic drainage. We know that the lymphatic system is super important. It's a network of glands, lymphatic glands, and it's an integral part of our immune system. And it's like a system of highways or motorways. So when the traffic is fluid and it runs, everything is fine. So everything flows, and the toxins have a way out. They can go out of the system relatively easy. Everything is great. When the lymphatic system is clogged up, then nothing flows. It's like a traffic jam. There are blockages, and this is why detoxing, the detox protocols, whichever modality you're going to use, is not going to work. And it actually is going to aggravate, because yes, you can do the detox protocol, you can do the heavy metal detox protocol, and yes, the toxins start coming out of the woodwork, but where do they go? If the lymphatic system is clogged up, they've got no way out. And this is why there is no results, and the patient is actually feeling worse. So lymphatic drainage, I learned, is one of the fundamental elements of well-being, and not just for chronic fatigue. I actually find for just about everything, because if your immune system, I mean, think about it, the lymphatic system is all over our body. It deals with everything pretty much. So keeping your lymphatic system healthy, and where everything runs, everything flows, is essential. Now, when I mention lymphatic drainage to my patients, sometimes they go like, oh yeah, I do lymphatic drainage, I do lymphatic massage, drainage massage, and this and this, and I brush and I do this and that, which is great, except it's like the fasting that I described earlier. If you're healthy already and you have a good lifestyle and you don't have any particular health issues, lymphatic drainage with massage, with brushing, with self-massage, whatever you want to do, it is great, and it can help you keep things flowing. But if you're full of toxins up to here, and the toxins are everywhere, they're in your matrix, they're at the cellular level, you can do all the lymphatic drainage massage you want 24/7, it's not going to do anything. Okay. So lymphatic drainage is key. At the same time, however, when you start draining the lymphatic system and the stuff starts finally flowing and the toxins start running out and being processed, your liver and your kidneys are going to be working overtime. And so you need to support them homeopathically. So we know that there are lots of really good homeopathic remedies for liver. Your Nux vomica is, top of the list, your chelidonium, and the kidneys, your berberis, and so on. So I will explain more in detail what kind of remedies I use. And then the symptomatic treatment, because as I say, yes, the lymphatic system, the liver and kidney support, absolutely essential. That's the base of your treatment, but it's not going to make you feel better immediately overnight. In the meantime, the patient is really struggling. Perhaps they cannot sleep. Perhaps they have digestive issues. Perhaps that their mood is really, really low, and they're borderline depressed. And so you have to do something for that, just to give them some victories. You have to give your patients some victories, some quick victories, so that they can see the hope, they can see that they can feel better, even if they've had this condition, they've been incapacitated for 10 years or more, etc. They need to see hope. So you need to give them something that shows that this treatment is going to work. And that is what I do typically. I use a lot of Bach flower remedies for this, and Bach flower remedies are very underused, I find, in homeopathy, and they are very undervalued. But they're incredibly, incredibly useful. They really shift the energy. They can make the difference between I'm feeling absolutely hopeless and nothing's working and I'll never be, I'll never have my life again, to, yes, I'm actually feeling better. I'm noticing certain things, you know, the attitude, the energy can be so, so important. And especially, particularly in symptoms like anxiety, which is incredibly common, of course, not just depression, but really the anxiety, the panic, which is understandable because if you're not able to function, you're not able to do the things that we take for granted, you do tend to feel depressed and be very, very anxious and panicky because you're constantly thinking, what if I need to do this? Or what if something happens? I cannot do this. I cannot do that. So the state of anxiety is always very, very high. And so Bach flower remedies really, really help. But also Narayani remedies. I use a lot of Narayani combination remedies. They're incredibly useful. The depression remedy and fear, and very often combined, that can really, really help. And very often patients are not even aware of their emotional state. They don't think they are feeling low, or they don't think they need to change their energy, because of course what they see is the physical symptoms, because they're glaringly obvious. You know, I cannot move, I cannot go for a walk, I cannot work. It's the physical stuff. So give me something for the physical. And then I say, okay. And after talking, I say, okay, and I also give you this depression remedy. And they're like, why do you give me this? I'm not depressed. And I said, well, you take it anyway. And take it 3 times a day, by the way, while you're at it. And then they come back, and then they realize and they see the difference, and they start talking, you know, the language changes. It's not about despair. It's not about nothing helps. I already tried this, it didn't work. It's more like, well, actually, I noticed that today I was feeling a bit better about myself, and da 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 da. So these are the things that can really make a difference. They sound like small things, but they're not. Or things about, yes, physical, the digestion system, or sleeping issues. So dealing with something, and it may sound like a low-hanging fruit. We're touching the branches of the patient rather than going to the root. But even just fixing the branches will make the patient believe that they can get out of this. Okay. So in terms of lymphatic drainage remedies, liver and kidney support. So what I tend to use now are combination remedies and Homocord remedies. So for example, for the liver, yes, Nux vomica is great. And there are different ways. I'm not saying that my way is the only way, but this is what works for me best, okay? And this is why I'm sharing it with you. So I used to give Nux vomica in various potencies, sometimes in ascending potency gradually. But now I found that Homocord Nux vomica works way better, way more effectively, and way faster. And for those who don't know what Homocord is, it's basically a remedy that's made of the same remedy, but combined in different potencies. So in the Homocord, you have the same Nux vomica, but you have it, and they're in X potencies typically. So you have the 3X, and then the 6X, and the 12X, and perhaps they go up to the 3C or 6Cs, but they're all combined in the same remedy. Same for kidney support, berberis. For the lymphatic drainage, that's a combination remedy. So that's multiple remedies, and it can be up to 20 different remedies in very low potencies, typically X potencies. And again, I find that works quicker, it's more gentle, and more effective. So these remedies come in drops, and that's another advantage from my point of view, because when you have drops, you can regulate the dosage. So if the regular dosage, the recommended dosage is 10 drops 3 times a day, I always start with 1. Because remember, these patients are typically incredibly sensitive. They usually, I don't know if this is the case with other homeopaths, if any of you have experience of this, if you're a homeopath or a therapist, but the people I see are typically individuals who have worked with 3 or 4 other therapists. And the reason why they quit every time was that the remedies or the supplements were too harsh and they were really sensitive. So what I'm saying is that typically I'm the last resort homeopath. I should actually change my name. Instead of homeopathy heals the last resort homeopath, because this is really, they tell me straight away, this is the last. If this doesn't work, that's it. I'm not doing anything anymore. I quit completely. I give up. So because of that sensitivity, I always say start with 1 drop in water and then gradually increase, even 1 drop a day. See how you feel, because the last thing you want for someone who is already incapacitated, who is already completely exhausted all the time, in pain, anxious, etc., is an aggravation. That's really the last thing you want. You really don't want that. So I really love these remedies. So there are different companies that make these remedies. In Europe, we have Heal, we have Guna. In the US, there is Desbio. And I do get a little bit of criticism from other homeopaths, because from their point of view, which is completely, it's everybody's got an opinion, it's totally fine. That's not homeopathy. That's not classical homeopathy, or whatever they call it. So my reply to that is that I really don't care. I just use what works for my patients, as long as it's gentle, it's safe, and it's effective. So, and it is homeopathic. And the other thing that I would say is that homeopathy is not immune from evolution. Everybody is subject to evolution, whether we want to or not. If you don't evolve, you die, pretty much. Ask the dinosaurs. And so evolution is key for just about everything. There is a lot of really good research that these companies do every year, and I would really recommend you look into this research. There are medical symposiums that they organize, at least in the UK, every year, where they present cases, they present more research, and there's always new stuff. And it's good to know that that there is progress, that even that homeopathy can get better and better. So so this is what I typically use. What I said at the beginning, this is not a DIY webinar, so I would not recommend people go and do this without guidance, without working with a professional therapist. for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons being that, first of all, this is not a 1 week, 2 week job. Typically, this drainage takes between 6 months and a year to really see the results and to make the results permanent. And of course, on top of that, then you may have sensitivities. You may have to pause the remedies for a while if the patient is feeling a little bit slightly aggravated and they can get a bit worried about it. And this is where the communication between the patient and the therapist is absolutely essential. And being there for your patient is essential. If you see your patients once a month, that's fine, but there has to be, at least I need to know how my patients are doing in between appointments, especially if the appointments are spaced out over weeks, over a period of weeks, because if they are perhaps aggravating, or if there is an acute coming in, if they're experiencing a cold or a cough or something else, I really prefer to know so that I can maybe help. And this saves time, because if I don't see the patient, and sometimes the patients don't have time, and I know that life gets in the way, and so I don't see them for 2 months, and then they come back and they say, oh, and this happened, and so I stop taking the remedies, and basically we have to start over again. If the communication is there, if there is good communication, I can do something about that quickly, and we can save time, and everybody wins, and the patient feels better more quickly. Okay. Now let's talk about obstacle to cure, and let's talk about trauma. So I had mentioned that earlier. Trauma to me is like a toxin. Now, I don't know about your experience, your direct experience or experience with your own patients, but 99%, honestly, of people with chronic fatigue who come to me, I'm always waiting for the tale about the trauma, because everybody starts with the physical. I can't do this, I can't do that, and I'm this hurts and that hurts, etc. And then I will ask at the end, or they will say, or if it's an email, it's really interesting, because it may be a very, very long email with all the symptoms, with all the this hurts and that hurts, and I can't do this and I can't do that. And then at the very end, the last sentence that, oh, and by the way, this horrible thing happened to me when I was a child, or this horrible thing happened to my daughter a few years ago, and it's something really horrible. It's something that really affects you mentally and emotionally. And we tend to underestimate these things, particularly compared to physical symptoms. So when the physical symptoms are so glaringly obvious and they're so big, we tend to think that the emotional trauma that happened, even if it happened to us, is not that big a deal, either because it happened a long time ago and we think we are over it, or because in our head, the physical, there's a hierarchy of symptoms, and the physical trumps the emotional, because you cannot really see the emotional after all. And perhaps that also happens. Perhaps the patient comes and they say, well, but I have been done a lot of counseling. I'm still working with a psychotherapist, so I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with the emotional. thing. So don't worry about that. Just fix my body, as if those two things were not happening in the same individual. And trauma can also be stored at the cellular level, just like a toxin. And I think that there is research that proves that. And because of that, trauma can stop the system from receiving help. And this is the nothing works for me scenario that I hear so often. Like, you can do what you want. It's almost like a dare. I dare you to help me because I tried everything and nothing works for me. Okay. And it's like the system is on high alert, like the high histamine. So it's the same. It works in the same way as an endotoxin. So your histamines are there to protect you from things that can be harmful to your body. And so they raise the alarm and they say, hey, this should not pass. And so you get the sneezes and you get that. But then they start to, when you start to overreact, your body starts overreacting. So everything gives you an allergic response. Because the system is on high alert. It's constantly on a fight or flight, and it's the same emotionally. And this is where, like I mentioned, Bach flower remedies are amazing, absolutely amazing, and Narayani remedies. And by the way, I've had patients who are so sensitive that even Bach flower remedies can aggravate them. And in those cases, when patients are so incredibly sensitive that they cannot take anything, I just advise them to hold the bottle. Just hold the bottle. Or even, I have a patient at the moment who is on arsenicum album and arsenicum album 30, but only he keeps the bottle in his field, as he calls it, meaning the bottle is on his bedside table. Okay, and that works for him. Any closer or taking one drop, diluted 5 times, 10 times, doesn't matter, he will overreact and he will feel awful for a couple of days. So that can also help. That can happen, and this again, and this is why this kind of conditions you really need to work with someone, because I can't just say, there is this protocol and you follow this protocol and you do ABC and you'll be fine. Everybody is different, and the differences can be really, really wild. Everybody is wildly different. So, but yes, typically Bach flower remedies help a lot. And there is also this, and I used to I include myself in this. I used to think that Bach flower remedies were only kind of effective for emotional things, like if you were feeling a little bit off or a little bit anxious, you take the rescue remedy and this and that, but it would not work on the physical level. And that's not true, strictly speaking, because we know that emotional states can also cause physical symptoms. Like, for example, if you are super anxious, for example, before an exam. I used to have a friend at uni. She would inevitably throw up before every exam. She was that anxious. And so that's anxiety. So if you give the Bach flower remedy for anxiety, you find the right remedy, you don't have the nausea and the vomit anymore. So it does definitely help with physical symptoms too. If you cannot sleep, because your mind cannot stop chattering, and you keep doing, the laundry list when you go to bed and you're trying to sleep, but you can't stop thinking about what you did all day. And it doesn't have to be anything, particularly worrying. A lot of people say, I can't sleep. I don't have anything particularly worrisome that comes to my mind. I just think about what I've been doing all day and what I need to do tomorrow. But I can't sleep. It doesn't make me sleep. So, white chestnut, why not? It does work. It just calms your mind and you can sleep. And you'd be surprised at how incredibly effective that can be. Just something so simple. But again, Narayani remedies, they have amazing combination. Again, depression, fear. I have not included thyroid issues, which are also part of chronic fatigue very often. But that's a whole universe again there. Or POTS symptoms, which very often overlap with chronic fatigue. So you have palpitation, random palpitations with no rhyme or reason, particularly at night. So all these things can cause emotional upset, anxiety, or they can contribute. They can make it worse if you already have it. But the past trauma is something that I find a lot. And it's as if the emotional trauma kind of causes, like a vase, and it cracks the vase a little bit. There's a kind of hairline, and then maybe a viral infection, maybe COVID, maybe the flu. That's the last straw that breaks the camel's back, and the vase shatters. But very often it starts with that emotional trauma, and that's something else that has to be worked on, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of patience, particularly if you have a patient who has already done a lot of therapy, psychotherapy, a lot of counseling, which is great. And I always encourage anybody who has emotional issues to do that, to work with a therapist. However, the illusion very often is that because they have done all that work, they're okay now. And then when you start working homeopathically, the emotional issues come back to the surface, the flashbacks come back, and you have to deal with it. And you also have to reassure the patient who's now like, what? I've been going to the therapist once a week for 30 years. Why is this coming back? And you have to do a lot of work, because trauma is a different subject. But I always say that the trauma doesn't go away, but what we can do is we can process it, we can transmute it, and we can turn it into something energetically. We can transmute it into something positive, but you cannot erase it. It doesn't go away. It definitely did something, some permanent change in physically. I believe in the DNA. Trauma can be passed down, and we can talk about ancestral trauma, generational trauma. But what we can do homeopathically is process it and transmute it. And I find that's the best way of dealing with it. But again, it takes time. But it does contribute to chronic fatigue as well, without going too much off topic. Okay, so the usual questions that I get from patients when they start working with me is, how long does it take to see results? And that's the $1 million question. So what I always say is that it really depends on your starting point. How severe is your condition right now? How strong is your vital force right now? Because of course, the stronger your vital force, the quicker you will bounce back. If you are really, really weak, if you're really, really low in vital force, it will take longer. And there is no getting around that. Also because I believe that what is slowly done is well done. There is no point pushing for detoxing. And again, this is why detoxing in that way doesn't work, because as I explained earlier, it either aggravates or it doesn't do anything. And there is no point aggravating an already exhausted, weakened system. So you have to really work slowly and carefully and gently. And so that's why I always say you need to give me at least 6 months. Which, to be honest, if you have had this condition for years, you know, it's not that bad when you think about it, you know, in proportion. Can I self-prescribe? No. Okay, that's the quick answer to that. No. After you've seen some results and after you start having a life again, you start working again, you start functioning again, then, and typically after 6 months or a year, this happens. Then at that point, the patient can just leave. And they know that if they have perhaps a relapse or if they have an acute, by that point, they know what to take. And I'm happy for them to just go on and do their own thing. But until then, no, I really would not. I mean, you can, there's no, I can't stop you, okay? The remedies are there, they're available. You don't need a medical prescription. So I'm not gonna, run after you. But I don't think it's in your best interest. It's not going to work. Yeah, you need a little bit of guidance, I would say, particularly at the beginning. Is this still homeopathy? Again, this is what I get. Not so much from patients, really more from other homeopaths. And the answer is yes, as far as I'm concerned. I call my, let's say, brand of homeopathy evolutionary homeopathy for that reason, because things are always changing. We get new remedies all the time, for example. There are new remedies being added to the materia medica all the time. In my small way, I have added quite a few already, and the research keeps going on, and it's great. Can I take other supplements, medication? Yes, absolutely. If you find that they help you, I have no problem with that, and homeopathy does not interfere with any supplements or medication you may be taking already, and are the improvements permanent? Now, do you know the way that you have to brush your teeth and floss, to keep your teeth healthy as well as clean? And sometimes you need the dentist, maybe you have an issue and then you go back home. You don't stop brushing your teeth, do you? So once you have reached a certain level of health, you have to maintain it. And that is also your responsibility. So anything you can do, like to have a good diet, good lifestyle, exercise, all the things that we know, So the improvements can be permanent. And then, of course, maybe another pandemic comes along, or maybe, something happens, you walk out and a break hits you in life happens. But in terms of improvement from this treatment, yes, the improvements can be permanent, but you have to pay attention to your body, and you have to maintain your health. Okay. Okay, so this is the last slide, and then I was going to mention just a couple of cases just to give you an example, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. So I worked in the last couple of years. I had a couple of patients, very different from each other. But one was a lady in her 60s who came to me with chronic fatigue that she'd had for a number of years. It wasn't particularly related to COVID, but the long and short of it was that she's an artist, and she could not work. She was not well enough. She did not have the energy to do any painting or sculpting or anything at all. Even going out for a walk was very difficult. And she was in pain all the time. And she was I got the impression she was very, very, very depressed. She was incredibly anxious, incredibly worried. There was a particular situation. She had particular circumstances, external circumstances that she had to deal with that were very, that weighed very much on her. And she was really, really worried. So then while talking, I asked if there was anything emotional, perhaps from the past, and it turned out that she had been assaulted when she was young. And yes, she had done all the therapy and all the counseling, but I could tell from the way she was relating the story that it was still very much bothering her. She had a lot of anger. And yeah, so that was the situation. And she came to me and she said, nothing works for me. I left my previous homeopath because everything was aggravating. And I couldn't, there were some remedies that had started to work and then they stopped working, and she was losing faith. And she did not want to take any supplements or herbs because she was too sensitive. So that was the situation. And so I started with the lymphatic drainage and the liver and the kidney. And again, I started literally from one drop. And it was already something. The good thing was that she never aggravated. And she noticed that, and that was a very good sign. However, she was always very very pessimistic about the whole treatment. And one of the things that really she couldn't stand was the fact that she could not sleep. The sleep was really, really off, and she was having these hot flushes, which had nothing to do with menopause, because she was way, way, way past menopause, but she was diagnosed with some kind of autonomic dystonia or something like that. And so she was attributing the hot flashes to that. So this is where I had to give single remedies to deal with the sleep and the hot flushes And then I realized that she was really depressed. I thought she was really depressed. And I gave her the depression remedy, the Narayani combination. And she was very skeptical at first. But I just said, just humor me, just take it. And it took just about 6 months of treatment. And over Christmas and New Year, I kind of lost touch a little bit. So the last couple of months, I didn't hear from her. And I was a little bit scared because she had not replied to my emails to see how she was doing. And then finally we had the last appointment, and it turned out that she had actually started working again. So she was actually traveling back and forth between New York and her home, and she has started teaching art again and making art and even sculpting, which is a very physical work, as you can imagine. And she loved it. She felt so happy because, for an artist, being able to create, that was her whole world. And even though the kind of external circumstances that she was in, that were still difficult, the way she was telling me about it, the way she was describing it, was completely different. It was very hopeful, very, well, accepting, like, this is the way it is. There are certain things that I cannot change. I just have to accept it, and I have to adapt. It was a totally different person. So I would say, and she is fine. She is going to do a deeper detox, which I did not recommend initially because it would have been too strong for her. But she said, I've got this box of, Desbio detox. Do you think it's okay? And I think at this point, it is okay for her to start taking that and to start doing the protocol by herself without my help. And if she needs any help, she can come back. That's fine. But what I mean is that she can work under her own steam now, which is really great. And another patient that I had, and I worked with him for a total of a year. He came to me, and he was a long COVID patient, and he's a therapist himself and very active, young, in his 40s, very physically active, but he could not do anything anymore. He could not stay up after 6 p.m. He was totally done in. He had to go to bed. He really forced himself to stay awake during the day. He had a lot of digestive issues. There were so many things he could not eat anymore. He was sensitive to everything. And he had a lot of emotional baggage as well. He was very angry, very, very, very depressed. He had suicidal thoughts, full-blown suicidal thoughts. And he had a traumatic event in his past. And so we worked on that. And we worked really, really slowly. And it took a long time for his anger to subside, and for his mood to lift. And finally, after a year, he's gone back to doing his sports without feeling any pain. He can eat pretty much what he wants now. And he's always been a very, very healthy individual. That was the other reason why he was so angry, because he'd always done everything right: good food, healthy exercise, yoga, meditation, all the things, and yet he couldn't function anymore. So there was a lot of frustration, but we did this treatment and focusing focusing on the drainage, lymphatic drainage, supporting the liver, supporting the kidneys. The kidneys is where your vital force is. The kidneys is where your chi is. So when you're fatigued, always think about your kidneys. There is something to do with your kidneys. They're not working properly. They may be overburdened. Yes, your liver, but the fatigue is particularly the kidneys area, so to speak. Okay, so I have other cases, but I didn't want to do it, to talk too long. So if you have any questions, let me know. Or if you want to put it in the chat.
Thank you so much for this incredible seminar. I just want to introduce myself. So my name is Anu. I'm a qualified homeopath. I'm a fourth generation homeopath. So between my family and I, we've actually looked at a lot of remedies. I just have two main questions, please. You mentioned something regarding a patient holding a remedy in the hand, as the energy was either too strong or for arsenicum itself, they had to put it on the bedside. How long would you request a patient to hold a remedy so then that remedy of arsenicum would start healing their symptoms, really?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I find that when a patient is that sensitive, they're going to tell you how long is too long. So I'm always saying, 5 minutes. Try 5 minutes. If you can resist for 5 minutes, and then put it down and see how you feel. But there is no manual for this. Everybody is so different. It's the same with the provings. When I do remedy group provings, there are some of my provers who are, frequent flyers. They come to my provings often, and they're so sensitive, and I love them for that because their intuitions is so spot on. But they're the ones who just look at the remedy, or think about it or meditate on it, and they get so much out of it. Whereas me, for example, I don't feel it. I have to take really big. Some patients work with high potencies, like super high potencies. Yeah, so there is no protocol as such. But this is why the communication with the patients, it doesn't matter how far away they are. I work mainly with US patients, but email me. I always tell them, please email me. Anything unusual, anything you don't like, any questions, let me know. I need to know what's happening because I need to understand what's going on. So that really helps. But yeah, it's a good question, but yeah, depends.
Sure. Thank you. My next question is, you mentioned about bush flowers supporting kidneys and liver. Now we know homeopathically, obviously you've mentioned Nux vomica, chelidonium. These are great remedies to look at, but what would you recommend for bush flower remedies for both?
Both remedy, I find crabapple very, very good for that. Crabapple is cleansing, I would say. So for allergies, and it works for acute situations as well. But typically it's a really good cleanser. It's very, very gentle, and it works on the emotional level because when you have so many sensitivities, you're also very, very anxious. And so for those who are scared of, trying this or going out or, being too sensitive for this and that, I'm thinking about people with multiple chemical sensitivities, for example, who are incredibly anxious even to, going outside or going to a cafe can be problematic. And so the more that, and they have good reasons for that, but of course that perpetuates and increases the anxiety levels. So crabapple helps on both levels, physical and emotional.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and I see lymphatic drainage remedies. What do you recommend? Are there specific remedies to help lymphatic drainage? Yeah, like I said, I use combination remedies. So there are different companies. If you're in Europe, Heal, spelled H-E-E-L, is a company that makes lymphatic drainage remedies, combination remedies in drops. Guna is another company. It's an Italian company. I believe you can find that in the US, but if not in the US, I use Desbio combination remedies, and they all have very similar names, like very, very clearly lymphatic drainage, and you can find them. But yeah, combination remedies. I don't use single remedies for that anymore. Okay. Any further questions?
I do have a question. So I'm not a homeopath, but I'm very, I've used a lot of the homeopathic. I do have a homeopath I work with. When you're doing, when you have multiple chronic issues, do you address them in a certain order, or is it addressed, you start with the lymphatic, obviously, like what you talked about today? How do you know which one is the most prevalent issue, or do you work on them all at once? I'll just give you an example. I've been diagnosed with chronic fatigue, Lyme, Hashimoto's, clogged lymphatic, of course, came up, and histamine issues. There's some trauma in there, of course. So, where do you start when you're dealing with multiple issues?
Okay, so yeah, so the lymphatic drainage is the base. And then it's really the patient tells you, because I always ask, okay, particularly when there is such a complex picture, what's the most urgent, or the symptom that really is the most bothersome for you? And that's what I start with. Then it depends, because, for example, that patient I was talking about, that lady, the worst thing for her was the sleep. Even with the chronic fatigue and everything, she was really, really, really affected by the poor sleep. And so, okay, that's not just a case of giving something like coffea cruda or some single remedy to help the sleep. You need to understand why is she not sleeping? What happens when she's trying to sleep? And in her case, it was these hot flashes. Okay, the hot flashes. So then, yes, let's do something for the hot flashes. Lachesis, sulfur, So the hot flashes down, she could sleep. So trying to understand, okay, tell me what really bothers you the most. And then let's try to, because there's no, she used to ask me, but is there no remedy, for example, to deal with the chronic fatigue, the tiredness? And I said, no, there isn't, because you are fatigued because of this and this and this and all the toxins and all the this and that. So we're trying to get rid of all the junk that's in your system, and that will, eventually you will pick up the pace. Your kidneys are working better. So, and in fact, the last time I saw her, and bearing in mind that she's 68, 69, and yeah, she was very pleased, but she was like, yeah, but I still get tired. Yeah, but you just told me you've been back and forth between, I don't know, Massachusetts and New York, and you've been teaching and you've been sculpting, which is a very physically demanding activity. I would be dead, you know what I mean? Like doing half of what she was telling me she was doing. So you're doing okay, lady. You know, it's like, oh yeah, well, I forget, I'm getting old, I need to, yeah, you know, you have to, you know, the be realistic as well in terms of expectations.
Right. Well,
But
it's
yeah,
like a
so yeah,
daily thing. Like, do you like reassess daily? Because like with Lyme especially, there's multiple co-infections. So every day some new symptom is louder than the day before. Like how long do you address the day before symptom before you address the new symptom? It's like it feels like every day it moves somewhere else. So in that situation, like how do you just, you know,
it really depends on the case. So the first thing is to take the full case, the whole thing, and make a plan. And then it's not just the therapeutics, it's not, especially for Lyme, it's also the diet. So looking at what you're eating, looking at the toxicity in your environment, in your home, and you know, everything, what you wash your clothes with, everything from the food to your EMF, pollution, everything. So that in those cases, that's really, really complex. Everything has to be taken into account. So yeah, so you can make a plan and then everything can break loose and you have to change course. But this again, this is the why it's so important to have good communication with your homeopath. So if you have a homeopath who, you know, listens, I really don't mind. I have patients who text me every day virtually, especially at the beginning, because you also have to, you need to get to know each other. I need to get to know a new patient. I need to get to know their reactions, their sensitivity, their fears, their worries. So yeah. So if it takes the text, a small, you know, short text every day, yeah, that's fine by me.
thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Okay. Righty, let's see any questions here. Diabetic neuropathy, does lymphatic remedy help? So lymphatic drainage helps. For me, that's the basis of just about everything. Because we all come with a toxic burden. And that's what homotoxicology is about. So everything that goes wrong in our health is because of how our body is able or unable to deal with toxins. Okay, so yeah, it will help diabetic neuropathy. The specific symptoms, that's a different matter. So that really depends on the individual case and what the symptoms are. Any other question? Weakness is primary symptom, especially in legs. Okay, so if it's especially weakness, so that can be a circulation issue. Weakness is kind of different from fatigue. So that can be a different thing. And, you know, I would need to have more information. Is there any swelling? Is it just primarily circulation? What exactly do you mean by weakness? I mean, there's always all these details. And I know that it sounds frustrating sometimes because, yeah, everybody's always asking, okay, so you're a homeopath. What can you give me for? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know you. I've never met you. I have no idea. I'm so sorry. It doesn't sound good, but okay. Okay, so if anybody, Dinesh, if anybody wants to contact me, I always offer an assessment, a free assessment session. You can email me at info@homeopathyheal.co.uk. You can follow me on Facebook, Homeopathy Heals. I'm going to put the recording of this session on my YouTube channel. I have a very small YouTube channel that I use for webinars like this that I don't do very often. But this will be on my YouTube channel. It's called Evolutionary Homeopathy. And I also have a Patreon channel also called Evolutionary Homeopathy. And that's where I put a lot of more educational content, case studies as well, stuff that I don't feel like I can put on Facebook because it's too long or too complex, or sometimes a bit maybe controversial. So, but if you want to join me, that's only $5 a month. And I put a lot of new stuff every month. But other than that, there is a lot of content as well on my YouTube channel and of course my Facebook page. But if you want to contact me for whatever reason, send me an email. Okay, anything else? Or we can just wrap it up if there's nobody else. Okay, gone. Right, okay. So thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, okay, so you'll see the recording tomorrow. And thank you so much and have a great rest of the week. Thank you. Bye-bye.